Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to my colleague from New Jersey. As you well know, Corey, it was my own father's volunteer work in prison ministry that really shaped my young life. My first visits to our state prison were when I was in middle school, and my dad was going to visit a Bible study group and brought a convicted murderer home on parole weekends to our house, which really shaped my sense of what it means to be willing to take risks for those who the rest of society has given up on. And the First Step Act, which you played a central role in, as was graciously recognized by the chairman previously, was meant to be a first step along a long journey. And we have a lot of important work we can and should be doing in addressing the ways in which our criminal justice system is profoundly unjust. We are months and months past the point where the people of Delaware at least expected action on reform efforts here legislatively to deal with racial inequality. And that should be on our agenda every day. It was the judge for whom I clerked on the Third Circuit who first took me to a federal prison. She made sure that every one of her clerks went to a federal prison, met with federal prisoners, had an understanding of what the consequences were of the decisions that we were contributing to. And I frankly think everyone who serves in this role should have that insight, both into victims' families and the consequences of crime, but also into what incarceration means, what things like cash bail and solitary confinement mean, particularly to young people. I've had a bill on solitary confinement of juveniles for a number of years. We should work on this. But let me get to questioning the panel. Forgive me, you touched a point of passion there, Senator Booker. If I could just briefly, since I know I'm the last questioner today, Dr. Bhatti from Lansing, Michigan, if I might. What kind of, two things. Rudy Giuliani, in speaking to an event about COVID, recently said people don't die of this disease anymore. Is that accurate? And what, if any, kind of meaningful relief can Congress provide that would actually help your clinic in Lansing, Michigan, and help those in public health respond to this pandemic?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I think flatly the answer to your first question is no, it is not accurate. People are still dying every day. In fact, 1,000 Americans each day are dying because of COVID. And there's a lot that Congress could be doing to help my patients. You know, you could be potentially expanding unemployment, you know, giving people cash assistance. My patients are having difficulty paying rent. I have patients who are finding difficulty even getting food to eat every day. I have patients with difficulty affording medications. And so my patients are facing real life challenges, and they can't afford to wait for an election. And they can't afford for Congress to continue with the hyper-partisanship that we're seeing. They need action now. And that's one of the main reasons I came today, was to advocate on behalf of my patients. Specifically, you know, giving people access to healthcare. Anybody who has a COVID-related illness shouldn't have to worry about going bankrupt because of that illness. And then making sure that we protect those people moving forward so that they don't lose their health insurance at any point in the future because of their pre-existing conditions. So those are just some of the things that I think could be done to help protect my patients and help them get a leg up.
Thank you, Doctor. It's my hope that we will find a path in these last 3 weeks before the election to actually deliver a meaningful bipartisan package. It should be robust, and it should provide resources, particularly for grassroots medical clinics. Ms. Staggs, I appreciated your advocacy around the health care of your children. You've spoken about how the Affordable Care Act is vital to keeping your children healthy and safe. My colleagues have said over and over again they want to repeal and replace the ACA. One of my challenges has been finding the replacement plan. Can you tell me what their replacement plan is for the ACA?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Now I can.
A few weeks ago, President Trump was here in Charlotte and signed an executive order that he said would protect pre-existing conditions. First of all, the Affordable Care Act is a whole heck of a lot more than protections against pre-existing condition exclusions. Second of all, the executive order that was signed per White House counsel had no legal effect. It was a great idea, but I have to tell you, like you, I remain all ears and incredibly eager to hear and see and read and consider an effective replacement plan. I know that my own senator, Senator Tillis, is he in the chamber today?
He's no longer here. He was earlier.
Okay. I know that Senator Tillis has put forth what is called a PROTECT Act that uses the term pre-existing conditions, but in effect doesn't meet the standard that we currently have with the Affordable Care Act. So I would just say to that the American people are on pins and needles and feeling very anxious for whatever replacement plan might someday appear, so we can understand what the impact is. I'm sure you can understand then the anxiety that comes with the absence of that. I mean, since 2017, when the little lobbyists first started to come together, we've been facing a future with threats to the Affordable Care Act minus a viable replacement, while our children's lives hang in the balance. It's been incredibly difficult and stressful for years, and that continues and feels more immediate with each day.
Well, thank you, Ms. Staggs. One of the things I try to emphasize in talking to people in Delaware is that the Affordable Care Act doesn't just protect the 20 million Americans who get their health care through ACA exchanges. It doesn't just protect the north of 100, maybe as many as 130 million Americans who have pre-existing conditions, now 7 million more because of this pandemic. It actually protects a majority of Americans. And this is relevant because we were this week considering a successor to Justice Ginsburg. It prohibits discrimination against women on the basis of gender. It doesn't allow insurance companies to treat pregnancy as a pre-existing condition or to charge more just because women are women. So it literally protects a majority of the American people. Let me close with just two questions, if I might, of Ms. Clark from the Lawyers Committee. Ms. Clark, my staff has identified, and I put up a board yesterday of 120 Supreme Court cases that were decided 5-4 that I now believe are at risk of reconsideration or reversal if Judge Barrett is confirmed. One of these 120 cases is Grutter versus Bollinger. It's a 2003 decision that upheld the promotion of racial diversity in admissions at the University of Michigan. Just this past week, the Trump administration sued Yale University for its efforts to promote racial diversity. A case similar to that, the administration has also recently supported against Harvard. Can you explain the impact this case has had for the nation and the consequences if it were overturned?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. There are a number of critical cases in the Supreme Court pipeline, and some of the most high-stakes cases are cases involving challenges to race-conscious admissions policies at colleges and universities across our country. As you know, the Justice Department just recently and astoundingly sued Yale University. There have been similar suits brought against Harvard University, the University of North Carolina, the University of Texas at Austin. My organization is involved in all three of those cases, and they are on a fast track to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has held that race can be one among a number of factors that our colleges consider in pulling together their college classes. What's at stake here is racial diversity, just the principle of racial diversity. I am deeply concerned that a Justice Barrett on the Supreme Court would upend the precedents that have been firmly established in this area, and that would turn back decades of progress in our nation and result in colleges and universities that are not racially diverse, colleges and universities that lock the door on Black students and Latino students who are deserving of access, roll back the clock on equal opportunity. So I'm glad that you asked this question, Senator Coons, because it really underscores how high stakes this nomination is for our nation.
Ms. Clark, you did some important early work in your career on election protection. President Trump and members of this committee have repeatedly attacked the validity of mail-in voting. Even though the president himself, members of his family, our troops overseas, our diplomats, routinely use mail-in voting as a way to cast their ballots securely, and there being no credible evidence of widespread voter fraud. We've actually, in reality, seen efforts by the administration to undermine the proper functioning of the Postal Service. We've seen the governor of Texas blatantly try to make it more difficult for voters to submit their ballots in a timely fashion in this upcoming election. We've seen lines between 5 and I think as many as 10 hours in the state of Georgia for those who are lining up for early voting stations. And the president has openly called for voter intimidation. Can you speak to the impacts of these impediments on voting, how they differ from the impact of any alleged voter fraud, and how this does or doesn't align with a long and tragic history in this country of voter suppression?
Ma'am, you certainly may answer the question just briefly if possible.
Yes, Chairman. Senator Coons, voter suppression is alive and well across our country. We see it each and every day in places like Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, states that were covered by Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. We know that people are struggling to access the ballot amid the pandemic, and there have been lawsuits to tear down the unconstitutional barriers to the ballot, which is why Judge Barrett's views on voting rights matters, and which is why it has been very disturbing to listen to Judge Barrett this week express an unwillingness to acknowledge that voter intimidation is unlawful, to express an unwillingness to acknowledge that voting discrimination is ongoing and exists. And these cases are in the Supreme Court pipeline and on the court's docket, which is why, again, we oppose Judge Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. She will turn the clock back on voting rights in our country.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.